In 2021, Richard Taylor from Boston watched his well-diversified retirement portfolio grow by a modest 6%, while certain investors consistently achieved returns exceeding 20%. Despite following every conventional financial rule, Richard remained firmly middle class, while others seemed to effortlessly accumulate wealth. "I've played by the rules my entire life," he confessed, "yet somehow I keep falling behind." The painful reality is that Richard was playing a game designed with inherent advantages for certain players, a game with marked cards. How many of us continue participating in economic systems without recognizing the strategic disadvantages built into our position? The disturbing truth is that 72% of Americans will retire without ever understanding the structural reasons why their disciplined efforts produced mediocre results. The wealthiest individuals throughout history have understood something rarely discussed in mainstream financial education. Economic systems aren't neutral playing fields, but carefully structured games with built-in advantages for those who understand the real rules. While conventional wisdom promotes a narrative of equal opportunity through hard work and discipline, strategic thinkers recognize that different positions in the economic hierarchy operate under fundamentally different rule sets. This perspective isn't taught in standard financial education because widespread understanding would fundamentally alter public participation in the system. Consider Margaret Baker from Phoenix, who spent 30 years maximizing her 401k contributions, only to discover that the tax advantages that initially attracted her became limitations that prevented strategic repositioning when economic conditions changed. The difference between her restricted options and the flexibility available to more sophisticated players reveals our first strategic principle: strategic adaptability in financial agreements. True wealth builders maintain maximum flexibility to adapt to changing conditions, rather than locking themselves into structures optimized for outdated scenarios. The second critical principle involves understanding the practical means for necessary ends in wealth building. While conventional wisdom promotes standardized investment vehicles for everyone, strategic thinkers recognize that different wealth levels require fundamentally different approaches. When Thomas Anderson of Minneapolis shifted from mass-market investment strategies to approaches typically reserved for higher net worth individuals, he began seeing results that had previously seemed impossible despite having the same underlying capital. This leads to our third principle: the importance of perception in financial relationships. Traditional advice suggests that financial markets treat all participants equally, but strategic thinkers understand that how you are categorized dramatically impacts the opportunities presented to you. Elizabeth Kim of Denver discovered this distinction when she restructured her financial identity to be perceived differently by financial institutions, gaining access to investment opportunities, terms, and information that had previously been invisible to her, despite no change in her actual net worth. The fundamental insight connecting these principles is rarely acknowledged in mainstream financial discussions. Different participants in the economic system play by different rules, with the most advantageous positions reserved for those who understand this disparity and position themselves accordingly. This isn't a conspiracy theory, but a functional reality of how economic systems operate, with multiple tiers of opportunity depending on your strategic positioning rather than simply your dollar amount. William Chen from Tampa discovered this reality when he realized that his neighbor with similar income and net worth consistently received preferably loan terms, investment opportunities, and financial information. The difference wasn't their financial positions, but their strategic understanding of how to position themselves within the system. These perspectives might seem contrary to the democratic narrative of economic opportunity that permeates financial media. However, the most successful wealth builders throughout history have operated with clear understanding of these structural advantages rather than the simplified public narrative. They achieved superior results not by working harder, but by strategically positioning themselves in advantage categories within the economic hierarchy. This approach isn't about rejecting participation in the economic system, but rather engaging with it strategically rather than naively. By understanding and applying these principles to your financial decisions, You position yourself to play the game with full awareness of how the cards are marked, rather than wondering why your disciplined efforts produce disappointing results. In our next section, we'll explore practical strategies that apply these principles to your everyday financial decisions, including specific techniques for repositioning yourself to access advantages typically reserved for more sophisticated players in the economic game. Let us continue our exploration of economic positioning by examining specific strategies that can help you reposition yourself within this marked card game. As we discussed in our previous section, understanding the tiered nature of economic opportunity forms the foundation for improving your results. Now we need to translate these insights into actionable tactics that can elevate your position regardless of your starting point. The first practical strategy involves strategic recategorization. Traditional financial advice treats account size as the primary determinant of your category. But strategic thinkers understand that behavioral patterns and relationship structures often matter more than raw numbers. Joseph Rodriguez of Cleveland implemented this strategy by restructuring his banking relationships from multiple consumer accounts to a single business banking relationship, despite no change in his actual assets. This simple recategorization immediately provided access to superior services, terms and opportunities previously unavailable to him. The second protection strategy centers on information arbitrage. In economic systems, different participant categories receive fundamentally different information quality, creating exploitable advantages. While conventional participants consume mass-market financial media, strategic thinkers systematically cultivate access to higher-quality information sources. When Barbara Nelson of Portland developed relationships with 3 professional-level information sources, she began identifying opportunities months before they became visible to mainstream investors, creating substantial advantages without requiring any increase in capital. Implementing strategic bundling represents our third crucial strategy. Financial institutions categorize clients partly based on the total relationship value, not just individual account sizes. Strategic thinkers consolidate their activities to achieve higher tier status, rather than spreading relationships thinly across many providers. David Martinez of Detroit concentrated his banking, investment, and credit activities with a single institution, deliberately crossing the threshold into their relationship client category. This reclassification provided him with preferential rates, fee waivers, and exclusive opportunities despite no change in his total assets. The fourth protection strategy involves leveraging institutional blind spots. Every financial system contains structural gaps between its stated rules and operational realities. While conventional participants accept standard offerings, strategic thinkers identify and exploit these institutional inconsistencies. Linda Jackson of Nashville discovered her bank's internal policy allowed relationship managers to provide significantly better terms for clients who met specific behavioral criteria unrelated to account size. By adapting her banking behavior to match these unpublished preferences, she gained access to their highest service tier, despite having moderate assets. Strategic timing serves as our fifth protection mechanism. Financial systems operate on predictable cycles that create temporary windows of opportunity for category advancement. Rather than approaching institutions randomly, strategic thinkers identify optimal timing for relationship negotiations and position changes. Kenneth Davis of Minneapolis timed his approach to financial institutions during their quarterly acquisition campaigns, securing terms and opportunities typically reserved for clients with substantially larger assets. The sixth strategy focuses on deliberate pattern establishment. Financial algorithms categorize participants based on behavioral patterns, not just static financial metrics. By systematically establishing patterns that financial systems associate with higher-value clients, you can significantly improve your categorization. Mary Patel of Austin implemented specific transaction patterns for 6 months, establishing a profile that financial algorithms classified as similar to much wealthier clients. This recategorization resulted in automatic qualification for opportunities typically restricted to higher net worth individuals. The final practical strategy involves strategic association mechanisms. Economic systems often extend preferred treatment to individuals associated with established high-category participants, while conventional thinking treats each financial relationship as independent strategic thinkers cultivate structural connections to higher-tier participants. Jennifer Lewis of Raleigh established a legitimate business relationship with a higher-tier economic participant, creating formal association that extended many advantages to her own position despite no change in her personal financial metrics. These strategies may seem unconventional to those accustomed to mainstream financial advice, which typically focuses on saving more rather than strategic positioning. However, they reflect approaches that have created asymmetric results throughout economic history. The perspective isn't about gaming the system, but understanding its actual rather than publicized mechanics. By implementing these practical strategies, you position yourself to receive the opportunities, information, and terms typically reserved for more advantaged participants. In our next section, we'll explore how to effectively manage relationships with financial institutions, advisors, and personal connections while implementing these positioning strategies, creating a balanced approach that improves your economic category while maintaining ethical integrity. Building on our positioning strategies, we now turn to the crucial aspect of relationship management. How you structure your interactions with financial institutions, advisors, and personal connections significantly impacts your ability to advance your economic position. Strategic relationship management requires both technical knowledge and nuanced social skills to elevate your category within the system. Let us begin with institutional relationships. Traditional advice suggests maintaining friendly but passive relationships with financial providers, but strategic thinkers understand the principle of controlled engagement. This involves systematically positioning yourself as a specific type of client that institutions particularly value. Carol Martinez of Seattle restructured her banking interactions to mirror patterns of their most profitable client segment, including communication frequency, service utilization, and problem resolution approaches. Within 8 months, she was assigned to their premier service team, despite having assets below their published threshold. When managing relationships with financial professionals, the principle of strategic categorization becomes essential. While conventional wisdom suggests that advisors categorize clients purely by asset size, strategic thinkers recognize that advisors actually classify clients along multiple dimensions, including profitability, growth potential, relationship quality, and professional interest. Robert Johnson of Minneapolis systematically positioned himself as a professionally interesting client by curating specific conversation topics and investment interests. This recategorization resulted in his advisor providing him with opportunities typically reserved for much larger accounts. The concept of deliberate information asymmetry provides powerful leverage in professional relationships. Strategic thinkers recognize that controlling what information you share creates significant advantages. Susan Williams of Atlanta implemented structured information disclosure with her financial team, revealing certain aspects of her financial situation while strategically withholding others. This approach consistently resulted in more favorable terms and recommendations than her previous transparent approach had generated. For personal network relationships, the principle of strategic association proves invaluable. While conventional thinking treats social and financial networks as separate, strategic thinkers carefully cultivate relationships that create economic category advantages. Patricia Garcia of Denver systematically developed authentic relationships with individuals in higher economic categories, which provided both valuable information and opportunity access that significantly accelerated her financial progress compared to her peer group. Throughout all financial relationships, strategic thinkers implement the concept of perception engineering. How others categorize you depends largely on specific signals that transcend actual financial metrics. Michael Thompson of St. Louis identified and adopted 12 specific behaviors that financial institutions associate with their highest value clients. This deliberate signaling resulted in his reclassification to preferred status across multiple institutions, despite no change in his actual financial position. The strategy of strategic incompleteness applies across all financial interactions. While transparency seems virtuous, complete disclosure often triggers standardized responses rather than customized solutions. James Wilson of Boston implemented partial information presentation in his financial discussions, creating situations where professionals needed to provide more tailored analysis rather than algorithm-driven recommendations. This approach consistently generated superior options compared to full disclosure of his circumstances. The final relationship management strategy involves controlled testing of boundaries. Strategic thinkers systematically identify and explore the flexibility within seemingly rigid institutional rules. Daniel Wright of Tampa implemented a program of regular small boundary explorations with his financial institutions, discovering substantial flexibility in terms, fees, and access opportunities. Each successful negotiation created precedent for future advantages, while establishing his profile as a high-value relationship despite moderate asset levels. By applying these strategic principles to your financial relationships, you transform interactions that typically reinforce category limitations into pathways for category advancement. Rather than accepting the default treatment associated with your financial metrics, you create patterns that align institutional incentives with your advancement. In our next section, we'll explore how to integrate these relationship strategies with our positioning tactics into a comprehensive system that steadily advances your economic category while maintaining authenticity and ethical integrity. Having explored both positioning strategies and relationship management techniques, we now arrive at the crucial task of integration. The true power of strategic economic thinking emerges not from isolated tactics, but from a comprehensive system that coordinates these approaches. This integration transforms individual strategies into a methodical advancement process that steadily improves your position in the economic hierarchy. The foundation of your integrated advancement system begins with category mapping. While conventional advice treats the economic system as a single playing field, strategic thinkers develop clear understanding of the actual category structure in their relevant domains. Frank Peterson of Nashville created a detailed map of the specific tiers, thresholds, and qualification criteria in his financial ecosystem. This explicit awareness allowed him to target specific advancement opportunities rather than making unfocused improvement efforts. The second integration principle involves creating a strategic sequence for category advancement. Different positioning tactics must be implemented in the correct order to maximize effectiveness. Richard Taylor of Denver discovered this principle when his initial positioning efforts yielded disappointing results. By reordering his approach to establish behavioral patterns before attempting relationship renegotiations, he achieved significantly better outcomes with the same underlying strategy. Strategic leveraging represents the third integration concept. This involves using each advancement to create disproportionate momentum for subsequent improvements. Helen Campbell of Portland implemented a deliberate leverage sequence, using her improved banking categorization to enhance her investment positioning, which then created credibility for professional relationship advancements. This cascading approach accelerated her progress far beyond what isolated improvements could have achieved. The integration of systematic documentation into your advancement system provides critical advantages. Strategic thinkers maintain detailed records of all category improvements, which creates both proof of status and negotiating leverage for future advancements. Elizabeth Kim of Minneapolis maintained comprehensive documentation of her financial categorization, service agreements, and relationship milestones, which prevented backsliding during institutional reorganizations and provided compelling evidence for continued advancement. The fifth integration principle focuses on developing an advancement schedule with specific milestone targets. Rather than pursuing improvement opportunistically, strategic thinkers create structured timelines for category progression. William Chen of Atlanta established a 3-year advancement schedule with quarterly positioning targets across 5 relationship domains. This systematic approach maintained consistent progress even during challenging economic periods when opportunistic advancement would have stalled. The final integration element involves establishing a personal philosophy of strategic authenticity. This isn't about deception, but rather thoughtful presentation of legitimate aspects of your financial identity. Sarah Cohen of Detroit developed an authenticity framework that allowed her to present her financial situation in ways that highlighted characteristics valued by higher-tier gatekeepers while remaining completely truthful. This philosophical clarity prevented both ineffective transparency and unsustainable misrepresentation. This integrated approach to economic positioning represents a fundamental shift from conventional wisdom. Rather than focusing primarily on earning more or saving more, it prioritizes strategic positioning, relationship engineering, and category advancement. The result is an just incremental improvement, but transformative change in how economic systems respond to you, regardless of your starting position. If the concepts in this series have resonated with you, I encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more strategic insights. The principles we've discussed aren't just theoretical. They represent practical wisdom that has created asymmetric results throughout economic history. By applying these strategies to your own financial life, you position yourself among those rare individuals who understand how to advance through the actual, rather than publicized rules of the economic game. Remember that strategic advancement isn't about manipulating the system, but understanding its true mechanics rather than its marketing narrative. It's about creating authentic patterns that financial systems naturally reward rather than fighting against structural realities. The time to implement these strategies isn't after decades of disappointing results. It's now, while you still have time to benefit from improved positioning. Your financial future deserves nothing less than the most strategic approach available. If you've found value in these concepts, please share them with others who might benefit from this perspective on how economic categorization actually functions.